Hello, it's Mike again, and this time we are on CD number 6. We're talking about that wonderful topic of pre-qualifying. I have to tell you, one of the biggest mistakes agents make, whether it be working with a buyer or a seller, is either they forget to, or they don't know how to, or they're afraid to go through the process of pre-qualifying. And what we're going to look at on this particular CD, and it's going to be one of the shorter CDs that we have in this set, is some of the key points that you and I have to burn into our subconscious minds in this area of pre-qualifying. Because I'll start with point number 1, where it says, remember that pre-qualifying will set you apart from your competition because it makes you look more professional. And virtually 95% of your competition does not pre-qualify. In fact, let's go a step further. They will not pre-qualify. Think about it from a different perspective. You go to a doctor, the doctor spends virtually all their time pre-qualifying before they make any recommendations on helping you through the problems you have. A professional pilot will spend 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes pre-qualifying the plane before they start the engines and try to take off. The attorney spends all their time pre-qualifying. In fact, the majority of the legal costs is the pre-qualifying cost, trying to determine what the problem is and how to solve the problem for you in the court. And yet a real estate person is going to sell a buyer a house for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, and the buyer says, well, I'd like to see property, and the agent's response is, well, let's go, and they never ask a pre-qualifying question. A real estate agent talks to a seller, and the seller says, well, I'm thinking about selling my house. Agent says, well, why don't I come on over, and they go over and start talking with no understanding at all of what the process is all about. So remember that pre-qualifying sets you apart from your competition. It makes you look like a professional person. And since the biggest percentage of all of your competition does not pre-qualify, what a wonderful advantage it gives you. Point number 2, if you're working with a buyer, have your lender pre-qualify the buyer from a financial standpoint. And then you pre-qualify regarding the type of home they want to buy and their motivation to buy itself. Point number 3, look for the people that have to sell when pre-qualifying versus the people that want to sell. There's a huge difference between I have to buy a house, I have to sell my house, versus I want to buy a house, I want to sell my house. Have-tos would mean the need for a bigger home, a smaller home, a divorce, financial issues, relocation, growing the family, the kids are now gone, they have to do something. Versus, well, if I could get $50,000 more than what it's worth, I would go ahead and sell my house. They want to, the other person has to. Point number 4, spend more time pre-qualifying and less time building relationships to build the quality of your business. See, my belief is, and I think you'll understand this when I say it, we use building relationships as an excuse for knowing how to sell. We use building rapport as an excuse for knowing how to sell. When you don't know how to sell, you build a relationship. When you know how to sell, you go ahead and you pre-qualify and ask all the appropriate questions. Point number 5, keep your pre-qualifying script everywhere. You could set appointments in your office, in your car, in your home. Be prepared. See, if a buyer says, listen, let's get an appointment, I need to get my home sold. You want to have that pre-qualifying script at your fingertips so you can do something about it right now and not have to waste a minute of your time. Number 6, the Mike Ferry rules on pre-qualifying are the following. A, pre-qualify 100% of your prospects, no exceptions. 100% of the pre-qualifying questions have to be asked, no exceptions. And then B, if you have an assistant, it's many times easier to have your assistant ask the pre-qualifying questions than yourself asking. Don't be afraid to let the staff ask the questions. Watch, pre-qualify 100% of the prospects, 100% of the time, with 100% of the questions that you have to ask, no exceptions. Point number 7, pre-qualifying allows you to set standards for those you want as clients, and of course that means you have standards for those you want as clients. See, why put yourself in a position where you're working with the bottom feeders of the world? Well, you know, if I could get the amount of money I want, I'd consider selling. Okay, let me come by. Wait a minute. Watch, we're not in a contest to try to raise the price, or in a contest to get a price that will cause the home to sell. See, qualifying allows you to set standards for those people you want as clients, because by the time you ask all the questions, you will quickly know if you want that person as a client or not. Number 8, when possible, do your pre-qualifying when you actually set the appointment itself, because it saves you a lot of time. Remember, time management. Your time is your greatest asset. Each second and minute that goes by, you never get it back, period. Number 9, practicing and role-playing the pre-qualifying questions leads to more confidence. It leads to better results. It leads to more appointments. It leads to a stronger mindset and more contracts signed. So listen carefully. Taking the time to practice and role-play your pre-qualifying questions leads to more confidence. You'll have more confidence. It leads to better results. You want better results. It leads to more appointments. You always want more appointments. It leads to a stronger mindset and more contracts signed. If you want all those things to take place, then guess what happens? You'll practice and role-play your pre-qualifying questions. Number 10, pre-qualifying will allow you to have more energy while going on the presentation. Remember, the objective in every presentation is to shorten the length of time and get a contract signed sooner, quicker, faster, and more effectively. If you're there for a long period of time, it generally means you haven't pre-qualified to determine their motivation. In the pre-qualifying, for example, with a seller, you need to know the motivation before you go to the house. You need to know what price they want in the house before you get to the house. And everything that you know saves you time on the presentation itself. The less time you have, the less time you spend, the more energy that you'll have on the presentation. Number 11, what happens to real estate agents that don't pre-qualify their appointments? So let's look at the other side. If you don't pre-qualify, what happens? I wrote down A, you spend a lot of time frustrated with yourself. B, you take overpriced listings, or you take listings for short periods of time. C, you work too many non-income producing hours. D, you reduce your hourly pay because you're spending a lot of time versus a little bit of time to get a contract signed. And E, they usually do not have a lot of prospects and a lot of appointments because they're too frustrated with the entire process. The fastest way to hurt yourself in this business is go on appointments on a regular basis that are not pre-qualified. But then look at point 12, the other side. What happens to agents that do pre-qualify their appointments? A, they focus on activities that lead to income. B, they're able to choose the clients they want to work with. And C, they have less client problems and as a result more business for themselves. Point 13, I've already stated it, nothing drains your energy and your motivation faster than going on non-qualified appointments. And it's happened to everybody. I mean, you've gone out there for some reason without pre-qualifying, you make your whole presentation, you're there for 30, 45 minutes to an hour, and then they say, well, we really don't want to buy, or we really don't want to sell. Wait a minute. I've been here for an hour, and now you're telling me you don't want to sell? And their response is, well, you never asked me prior to coming out if I really wanted to sell. Shame on the salesperson, not the seller. Point number 14, we should be listing 75% of the people we make a presentation to. Pre-qualifying intensely increases your percentage. I saw a report that said that according to the National Association of Realtors, for every 100 presentation an agent goes on, they get 22 listing contracts signed. And we know for a fact that within the Mike Ferry organization, the poor agents get 50 to 60% and the great agents get 75 to 80%. The difference is your ability to pre-qualify. Point number 15, when pre-qualifying, and if their answers, are vague or unclear, don't be afraid to pin them down, ask additional questions to determine their motivation. So, Mary and Bob, when your home is sold, where are you moving to? Well, we really don't know. We don't know what we want to do. We're not really sure. Excuse me. You want me to list your home for sale and you don't know what you're going to do if it sells? Well, we're not really sure. What if we list it today and it sells tomorrow? What are you going to do? Oh, it wouldn't sell that fast, would it? Well, what if it did? What would you do? We don't know. Well, then let's do this. Let's figure out what you're going to do before we list your home for sale. See, pin down the motivation. Point 16, pre-qualifying will draw out the objections in advance. This way you can be more proactive on your listing presentation. See, one of the greatest advantages to pre-qualifying, in my opinion, has always been the thought that as soon as you pre-qualify, you draw the objections out instantaneously. You draw objections right out instantaneously. The faster you draw objections out of the seller or buyer, the better you can be at the presentation. And point number 17 in this very, very short CD today on pre-qualifying, it's okay to lose a prospect or an appointment because of pre-qualifying. It's better to lose them during the pre-qualifying process than wasting your time and discovering they can't sign a contract during the appointment. See, it's okay to lose a prospect. It's no big deal. If you remember in lead follow-up, one of the points I gave you was it is a numbers game. Remember, it's a numbers game. So I'm going to pre-qualify because I want to raise the level of professionalism between myself and my client. I want to be looked at and respected as a professional salesperson, and I want to offer that respect to them by knowing exactly what they're thinking, what they want to do, and I want to show them how I can make that happen. It all comes back to pre-qualifying. Pre-qualify, pre-qualify, pre-qualify for better results, more contracts signed, more income to you. Talk to you on our next CD.